to them. Gill, it's your turn. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Virginie. And good morning, everybody. Fantastic to be here. I'm Gill Whitty-Collins, and I am the author of Why Men Win at Work and How We Can Make Inequality History. And in my previous life, I was at Procter & Gamble for 26 years, far too many years, where I became enlightened about the gender inequality issue. And I now work doing various things, including talking a lot about the book and about this issue, but also doing consulting work with organizations and coaching work with individuals to try and make some progress on this. And what I love about the theme of this forum, this event, and this panel is the sense of urgency to commit to equality as a priority, not just talk about it. My goodness, isn't this sense of urgency needed? There is so much talk about gender equality. There is a lot of activity. There are so many good intentions everywhere, but I think we need to face the brutal reality that there just isn't enough progress. There's no real progress at all in many senses. Unbelievable, isn't it, that here we are in 2022 and still we look around the world and over 90% of the leadership positions are still held by men. We all know the numbers. 7% of CEOs are women, 9% of heads of state, only 25% of representation of government on average across the world is women. And frankly, I think we need to stop accepting it. And we need to stop being so positive and patient and polite about gender equality. We're not a minority. We are 50% of the population. And I think we all agree we have equal intelligence, equal competence, equal leadership ability even, which is absolutely proven. So we need action and we need interventions now to get that 50% representation, which is absolutely what we unequivocally should have. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to hear about 30%. I don't want to hear about 40%. I want to hear about 50%. So it's absolutely time for urgency, time for priority. Really, I think we're all here feeling the same thing. It's time for real progress now. And that's what we're going to talk about today on this panel. And we have a fantastic panel for you. Really diverse experience that they bring. And they're going to bring some really diverse perspectives from business, from education, from all over. So I would like the wonderful panel, please, to come and join me here on the seats, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Have a seat. This one is yours, Fleur. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves to these wonderful people. Paulette, let's start with you.
All right. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Paulette Cenia. I'm the president and CEO of the Canadian Women's Foundation, which is a 30-year-old organization that is Canada's public foundation for gender equality. And we focus on fundraising, grant making, to address issues around gender-based violence, women's economic development, girls' empowerment, and inclusive leadership, all leading towards systemic change. Great to be here to join you.
Welcome.
All right, my turn.
Fleur.
I'm Véronique Tran. I'm professor of organizational behavior and also the dean of ESCP Business School Berlin campus. We are the oldest business school in the world, founded in 1819, but we particularly proud ourselves to foster multicultural and diverse and hopefully inclusive and equitable environments, and of course educate young leaders and lesser young leaders to obviously embrace new mindsets. So that's me.
Thank you. Fleur.
Hello, my name is Fleur. I work at AB InBev. It's the world's leading brewer. For those who do not know our corporate brand, you might be more familiar with some of our beer brands. So we brew beers like Stella Artois, Beck's, Corona, Budweiser, etc. And at AB InBev, I'm leading the corporate affairs team for what we call our Zone Europe.
Welcome, Gabriele.
Thank you, Jill. I'm Gabriele, Gabi Haessig, Managing Director for Communications, Public Affairs and Sustainability at Procter & Gamble. And Procter & Gamble has been a key partner of the Women's Forum for many, many, many years, because for us, we serve 5 billion consumers globally, men and women and children in very different parts of the world, with products that hopefully make your everyday, this is important, your everyday a bit better. So we hope that already today we've been part of your morning routine.
So welcome to this wonderful panel. They are bursting with a sense of urgency and actions, which they're going to share with you now. So I want to start, Paulette, with you. You know, a key focus of our theme for this panel is equality as priority. And I'd like you to tell us, what does that mean for you, equality as priority?
Well, I think you've already talked about the fact that it's urgent. And I think that's what the pandemic in particular has revealed, is how particularly urgent gender equality is. Because in Canada, we've certainly seen that through the numbers, for example. So we've seen a huge impact in terms of what we're calling the Great Resignation. You may have a different name for it where you're from, but we're seeing that particularly with women who are in the caring fields or who are in right up to the corporate levels. We're certainly seeing the impact of that. So I think that if we want to actually achieve something by 2030, in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals, then we've got some work to do. And so I think it's really about justice. Equality to me is about justice. And in this case, it's about gender justice. And it's a kind of justice that is intersected with a number of other things. So you're talking about abilities and race and gender diversity. You're talking about people with all kinds of vulnerabilities. And so when I talk about equality, it's an inclusive equality, and it's really also about equity. So how do we actually level the playing field? It's for everyone, so everyone can have full access to whether it's public services or jobs, or being able to have a decent living, a livable wage. Equality to me is about all of that, or else without it, then we end up with people being more vulnerable and ostracized and marginalized. And we're seeing that so much more now, particularly with people with all kinds of diversities that will show up for whether it be the programs that we fund in communities across the country, or whether it's folks who are experiencing violence, gender-based violence, which is one of our major programs. Being able to understand what that is and what the impact is will actually break your hearts. And so the stories that we've seen at the Canadian Women's Foundation or the organizations that we fund makes us know for sure that this is an urgent matter that can't wait for folks to actually see the light. And that's why, to me, it is an issue of justice. And I'm a justice advocate. That's what I've done for my entire career that spans over 3 decades. And so I can't wait for justice to happen, and I hope you can't either.
Thank you so much. It's such a complex one, equality, isn't it? It's so overwhelming. There are so many overwhelming things going on. That's why it's so important, I think, that we prioritize and we act, because you can get overwhelmed by the complexity of it. So, so important. Véronique, breaking barriers is also a key element of the theme for us today on this panel. I know you're personally very passionate about breaking the barriers that are created by unconscious bias and all of those forces. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes, with pleasure. don't let me be too professorial.
Oh,
Sorry,
please be professorial.
That's going to be my my contribution. Anyway, so yes, I'm passionate about it on two accounts. Because I studied psychology and management, and I studied, decision making and diversity and the impact, of emotion on decision making. But it's also part of my own life and my own career, where at a very young age I decided I wanted to work and have a career, and I had to fight lots of people who wanted to put me in boxes, namely men who wanted to put me in boxes. You're not, good enough as a house hostess, or you're not good enough as holding a household, or you're not this or you're not that. Okay. And coming from females, right? Here comes the trick, because the unconscious bias doesn't only come from males, but also from females. So your grandmother tells you, you cannot marry because you're not, you're not good enough to be a housefrau. So that's personal. From a scientific standpoint, so we have in our brain two parts. I don't know if some of you are familiar with Kahneman's book, Think Fast, Think Slow. So it's a book that you can find in any airport now, so it's good. It's science brought to people. So your brain basically functions at two levels. So you have like a instinctive part of your brain, and you make very quick shortcuts on, you make quick judgments on things and on people. So of course, most of our interactions are with people. So what do? We judge people on their appearance, their gender, their ethnic origins, whatever the appearance is. They're blue, they're yellow, they're green. We make some judgments. Usually those judgments are not super positive. That's also human traits. And so by the time you bring it to the more slow brain, where you have to think and you have to focus and you have to reflect, you have a chance to take a second reading on the situation or on your first judgment. And why I'm passionate about it, of course, because I'm a professor now, and we try to, as I say, educate people to have awareness and then change their behavior. Awareness is now not enough. You stop me when I...
No, keep going.
Awareness is not enough, because we've done tons now of unconscious bias training to say, hey, watch out. Your brain does that, but it's not really good. But that can backfire, because, you say, okay, fine, I know, but, change is pain. And in order to change your own behavior, you have to bring it again to this, both to the part of your brain that's going to reflect on it profoundly, and it also has to change in your heart, in your emotion, in your guts. And then time for action. Then it's not enough. Then we have, I'm going to pass on the floor to Fleur and Gabriele, who will tell us, okay, what's next? What do we do once we're aware of those biases?
They're so powerful, aren't they? Because they're unconscious. So they are controlling us, and they're controlling us to make decisions about who to give jobs to, promotions to, leadership roles to. We're actually being duped by them in many senses. There's a brilliant quote. It's not mine. I've stolen it. But we're not responsible for our first thought, but we are responsible for our second thought and our first action. And I just think that it's the way to think about it. We all have unconscious bias. It's what we do with it that really counts. Gabriele, you work for P&G, our beloved P&G. I was obviously there a very long time as well. And I know how much focus and intention there is on driving equality and diversity there is there. But can you share what you're concretely doing to drive real progress, action and progress on equality, diversity and inclusion?
With pleasure, you know me, I'm really action driven. So
I know you are.
And it is important, we all are on this matter. And I just wanted to reply to Colette, saying that equality is a matter of justice. Yes, it is. And it is a matter for companies for success. It is a vital requirement for growth, for for us specifically, as we are catering for the world's consumers, whether they are in Germany, in France, in Europe, or globally. And this is the diverse set of people. So we really not just believe, but we have learned that it is important to have a diverse workforce. And this is why, Gill, you are referring to, yes, at P&G, broadly speaking, we are 50-50. Does that mean that the challenge is over? No, because, it's not just a numbers game, but it's also important on how we now are a force for further change within ourselves in terms of inclusion, as well as, outside. And what does that concretely mean? It means that to drive inclusion, we've had MARC programs. Maybe you know the abbreviation MARC. It stands for Men Advocating Real Change. Hence, to drive change across the organization, and not just driving awareness of bias, but also acting on it, having that second thought, being conscious about, your second thought and then the first action. I love that quote, Gill.
I wish it was mine.
But it's a good one to remember for all of us, because this is really true. It's not just how things happen. We have a responsibility in this. So helping all of us be a change driver, because it's not a woman's thing. It is a societal thing, right? So point number one. Point number two. I said that we are broadly speaking 50-50. Yes, there are areas where this is not yet the case. So we talked this morning about STEM. So P&G has, for the past years, been supporting Femtech. Many of you will know them. They are advocating and they are supporting and they are further driving women who want to have a STEM career, and providing opportunities, internships, talks, and clearly also having, via those Femtech programs, access to great female talent, because we need it. Yeah, we need great young women to be successful in future. We need great inclusive teams. And lastly, our company is not just, the place within, but also the way we work with partners and the way we are working with our suppliers, for example. In the US, just to name one number, we are now spending $2 billion with female-owned companies. We've got a target of spending 10% of our global purchasing spend pool, which is quite significant, with female-owned businesses. And this is then 10 times what's currently happening globally on average. So it is important to put numbers to the actions and make sure that we act on this. And just, a last point, us as brands companies, which we are, a company that invents great products, produces them, and then markets them. So in our spend pool of production, we set a specific target in 2018, and then only 11% of our ads were directed by women. Today, it's 45%. So from 2018 to today, getting to equality and making sure that not just, in advertising, but specifically, in the teams also behind them, we are putting actions to our words. And I think this is probably a mission, making sure that what we say is what we do.
Fantastic to hear. I love the work that you're doing with suppliers. I have a lot of friends who are suppliers to P&G, and they say, no, there's absolutely no way that you can supply P&G unless you've got your equality and diversity house in order. So it's absolutely brilliant. And let's hope we get a woman CEO at P&G one day, very soon. Fleur, I know your company also has a really significant D&I program in place to deliver, again, action and real progress. Can you tell us a little bit about that, about what you're doing and what we can all learn from that and go away and search and reapply, as they say at P&G?
Sure. Thanks, Gill. And I want to open my statement with echoing what Gabriele just said. So also for a company like ours, for AB InBev, building an equitable, diverse and inclusive culture and workforce is an absolute enabler for business success, right? Our business performance depends on this culture. And our, let's call it just D&I policy for the ease of this conversation, but our D&I policy was accelerated throughout COVID. we know, and there exists ample evidence and proof that businesses who have a proper D&I culture, they take better and bolder decisions. And this was really a capability that we needed, or that became obvious throughout COVID, right? We are a beer company. We and all our supply chain, we're very exposed. So D&I has grown into becoming a true business enabler. Now, how do we do that day to day, right? How do we embed this D&I policy in our day-to-day work? So I'll try to be as concrete as possible, right? So on a European level, I can only speak to our European zone. We have created what we call our D&I Council, right? And this is a council that is led by our business leaders. So this is not an HR initiative, right? This is not a people initiative. This is an initiative that is driven and owned by our leadership, by our business leadership. And so within this D&I Council, which meets every couple of months, we have different focus points, and they grow over time, right? At this moment, we're focusing on 4 priorities. The first one still remains people and workplace. And this is led by our European COO, right? So it's not led within HR. And obviously there the objective is to build this D&I culture within the workforce, right? I want to give there one example of one action that we undertook. And I see a lot of young people here, young graduates probably. So if you're interested in applying for what we call our global management traineeship, these are the leaders of our future, right? You will go through an entire evaluation process, right? You will have business cases that you need to solve, you have interviews that you need to do. And here in this process, a couple of years ago, we sat at 30% female representation, right? Not enough. So we found partners who were helping us in this process to choose the future leaders of our company. And this partner is called Cognisis. They are experts in predictive people analytics. So they have built a tool based on data science, on AI, and even on neuroscience. And they helped us to break all biases. So when we, as leaders of the company, we need to evaluate these young students, these young workers, we don't know their race, we don't see the picture, we purely see their skills and their capabilities and how they fit into the role of these young management trainees. And today we sit at 50%, right? And that's amazing because those are the leaders of the future leaders of our company. So first pillar, I'm not going to dwell too long on the other 3 pillars. I see you look at me right there, talking too much.
All of this.
So the second pillar that we focus on is supply chain. Right, Gabriele, you mentioned already. I love the fact that you're communicating externally that you have this 10% target, but also we work to a more diverse supply chain, right? We buy millions and millions and millions of euros, right, in Europe. So this should go to the right set of companies. And also here we work with partners. We work with WeConnect, which is a network, a global network of women-owned enterprises. So those give us access to those type of smaller businesses. Because also for us, it's not always easy to find those companies, right, who are willing to sell to us. And then the third and the fourth pillar are marketplace, so how our brands speak to our consumers, and finally communities. But I'm sure I'll get into that later in this discussion.
Fantastic. I love all that. It's so much action and focus there. And I love your HR point as well. I always say to the companies that I work with as a consultant, it's not an HR strategy. It's a business strategy. This is a business strategy. Don't do it because it's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do. Do it for your business because you will absolutely grow your business. Now, Fleur, Paulette talked there about data and how they've used data, and that's a remarkable piece of progress you've made there with that. I know you're a huge believer in the importance and the power of data to drive equality, as am I, by the way. You get what you measure, and you don't get what you don't measure. It's definitely one of the mantras. Can you tell us about when you've seen data really come to life and drive action and progress in this area?
Yes. First of all, data is critical to be able to measure progress and be able to track what works and what doesn't. And the reason that I'm a big believer in data is because it tells a story, right? So we can all sort of have our own gut feelings about this, but how do we prove that what we're saying is true? So data is important. Even further, disaggregated data is important. So in Canada, we have the numbers around the gap in terms of gender equality, whether it be women on boards, women who are in political office. We don't have enough. I don't know if any country does. Women who are holding various kinds of leadership positions. But then we know this story is not just about women. It's about the multiple identities we walk with every day, right? So for example, you know, I'm an African Caribbean, African Canadian woman. That's who I am. I'm also straight. Knowing who I am is important. Knowing who you employ is important. People with diverse languages, people with diverse racial backgrounds, indigenous identities. So disaggregated data matters, right? And so telling the story of what you're trying to accomplish is important. So one of the things that our track that we're on in Canada is understanding and creating what we call equity benchmarks. And equity benchmarks is us setting the goals, as we've heard before, of what we're trying to achieve with whom. So that we know that the road to gender equality is not a straight one, it's not a linear one. Gender equality is not a linear or binary existence, right? And so being able to understand that is important, and that's why it's important to disaggregate the data. Know how many people are in the society or community you're working with. And so if you're located in a community, let's say in Canada, that has a significant Indigenous population, but you don't reflect that in your organization, something is wrong, right? So being able to understand that gap and being able to fill it. One of our founders of the Canadian Women's Foundation was the late, great Rosemary Brown, who said, until all of us, and I emphasize all of us have made it, none of us have made it. So we know that when it comes to the gender pay gap, for example, that in Canada we're having, I think the latest is 87%, but that's for women. What is it for Black women, for Indigenous women, for women with disabilities, right? So understanding that is important. During the pandemic, we saw that those who were most vulnerable or suffered the greatest disadvantages in society were racialized people, women or people with disabilities, those who were caring for us without whom we couldn't stay alive during the pandemic, yet they're the ones who are being laid off, or who don't have the livable wages, or who don't have the ability to be able to pay for rent where they live, right? So being able to understand the story behind the numbers is what's important. And so that's why at the Canadian Women's Foundation, we fund organizations that address those who are most vulnerable to these particular pieces in terms of existence. And so what we do on a daily basis is understand who we're funding. So doing the data on who is getting the money from the Canadian Women's Foundation is important. So 20% on average of our funding goes to Indigenous communities, right? But what we found out when we dug further is that not enough is going to racialized communities, not enough is going to organizations that work with people with disabilities. And so now we're setting the equity benchmark around that so that we can set a goal as part of our strategic business plan, right? So make it a part of our business plan, and telling the truth about who we really are and what we really do is important, even if it embarrasses us, because we can set the goal for what it is we're trying to achieve, and being transparent about what the data says, and as well as what is the goal we're working towards, and understanding what's working and what's not working. So that's why I'm a huge believer in data.
I could not agree more. I'm a huge believer too. I think literally it's like an electric charge into the discussion when somebody throws in a piece of data, isn't it? It's like there's talk, there's talk, there's talk. And then there's a killer piece of data and you say, okay, we cannot argue that. And perception lies. Perception lies. I was talking last night over drinks with somebody about that fantastic data that if men see a room which is about 25% women, they think that's an equal number of women. Because that they're not used to that. So many discussions that I have. Oh, it's not gender equality, not an issue anymore. Women are getting all the jobs. You throw in 7% of CEOs, 9% of heads of state. Perception can mislead us, but data, woof, gets us right back where we need to be. I want to talk about parental leave a little bit because I think we all believe that managing parental leave well and much, much better than we generally do is critical to driving gender equality. Véronique, why do you think more companies are not managing it better and organizations are not managing it better than they are?
We will have example where it works, but yes, let's try to think what could be the obstacles. Well, first, we have to think again 2 levels. First level is the individual level, the mother's level. By making it just the woman's problem or the woman's issue, you want a child and you go on maternity leave. So what about her motivation, her desire to, or her being torn apart between being with her child or children and keeping a job or a career? So that's the first challenge. And at the organizational level, it implies lots of systemic thinking that we sometimes don't put in place. So we think, HR issue, I have to replace the person, I have to onboard a new person. Maybe like in Germany, we can stay in maternity or parental leave up to 3 years. That's an HR challenge in itself, because then you have to find someone with similar competencies. That person comes back, the person replacing leaves, so you have this ebb and flow of people. And I really think that, so these are the challenges that we have. So we need to overcome that by probably thinking, more systematically and systemically about the issue, and also encouraging networking, keeping the bonds, keeping the ties. Like the person who lives on maternity leave then has also a chance to have parental, to share that nice event with the partner. And I think to see the glass half full, thank goodness we have evolved on there, because we also have now parental leaves shared by the fathers and or the partners, not necessarily the fathers, but the partners. And so maybe we can hear some.
I talk a lot about gender neutral parental leave and how important that is. And Fleur, I know you've got a really good example, a role model example, actually in your company of this. So we would love you to tell us about that.
Happy to do so. But maybe before I go into parental leave, I'm very eager to support Colette's message on data, right? It's also very true within a business structure like ours, and I'm sure that P&G measures as well.
Yes.
Because if you don't measure, obviously, you cannot take concrete actions, right? And I want to share how we measure our leadership capabilities at AB InBev, because I think it's a great example. So on an annual basis, you have peer-to-peer reviews, your team reviews all the leaders. And sorry, I see a couple of minutes left only. And within that review, we have set a D&I index. So our leadership capabilities, we included 3 that lead to our D&I index. So that's self-awareness, inclusiveness, and developing. So I think it's a great tool to know in which teams do we have a problem, which functions do we have a problem, which countries do we have a problem, right? You can go right to the granularity to see what your baseline, how your baseline is evolving. Now coming
Tell
back
us
to
about your
the
gender neutral
parental leave.
before we run out of time. We're
So
desperate to hear about
our
it.
parental leave, so unfortunately I had my 3 kids just before the introduction of our new parental leave. But yeah, very proud of this initiative. We did social listening, so we listened to our colleagues, what are their needs, and it was very obvious that we needed to change our parental leave policy. So we do not make the distinction between father or mother. We make the distinction between primary caregiver or not. So the first primary caregiver is paid 100% up to 6 months. When the primary caregiver comes back to work, they do not come back to work full time, but they are paid full time. And also for the secondary caregiver, we improved our policy significantly. That said, I want to make one important mention in the margin is that even if we do not make a difference between mothers or fathers, very often the regulatory framework does, right? For instance, in Belgium, where we're headquartered, the primary caregiver is by rule the mother, right? So we follow the regulatory framework there.
Isn't that a disgrace? You have a gender neutral parental policy, but our governments don't always. So that's definitely something to think about. I really want to get to this this last question, because I know we're not all keen to hear about it. I think we all feel that what we see in the media is so important. It forms gender bias, and it has the power to overcome and break gender bias as well. P&G is one of the world's biggest advertisers. Tell us a little bit, Gabriele, about how you use that power to break down bias and barriers and drive equality and diversity.
Very intentionally. Very intentionally. I think we've all come from the 70s when there was advertising critique and stereotypes being discussed, and we faced that challenge. And we really went back and thought about it and said, yes, that's right. Advertising surrounds us. It's part of our just narrative carpet. It influences us, in the system one that Véronique mentioned. It is just, part of our reality. And hence we've got a responsibility. Full stop. And that has translated over the past 10 years in real formidable campaigns. And what is important, it's not about educating people, right? It's not about saying what's right. It's about representation. It's about sharing, the realities of life, making sure that we represent different fields of consumers. It's a desegregation of data that was mentioned, right? So to make a couple of examples, our Like a Girl campaign has measurably changed how girls feel in puberty. And we have measured that, and teenage girls, before we started the campaign, about 18% were okay with the saying like a girl. The rest felt it's diminishing them. You're doing something like a girl, which means you're doing it really badly. Yeah. And at the end of the campaign, measuring it now, it really is above 80% that now girls think like a girl. Doing something like a girl is a positive connotation. And I think that's fantastic. Again, measure a fantastic number. But also, the role men play in society. Gillette is the #1 man brand. Men identify a lot by how they treat their hair across the entire body, including facial hair. This is part of who a man is. And as Gillette is the world's leading shaving brand, we coined the term, the best a man can get. And we've really rephrased that to a best a man can be, looking at the inside and showing different role models. And again, that has sparked great discussion and is changing at the end of the day how we are discussing this. But we also had household campaigns, even, Ariel in India, just to say it's not, a European thing. It's really a global discussion. We asked the question of who should do the washing? Is that by nature? Is that something that's genetically encoded that women do the washing? No, it isn't, right? And it is not difficult. I always said to my teenage sons, they're now grown up and they do a lot of the washing, and not because they, they're kind enough to do it, not because it's just normal. In their way, if you can operate a Game Boy or something else, then you can operate a washing machine. You're pretty capable of doing that, right? And obviously it works. So just 3 examples of saying how we intentionally uncovering bias, changing the narrative, and are really concretely behind it. And I think that is something that is important for all of us, using what we do every day in order to make a change.
It's fantastic, fantastic. So proud of P&G for the work that you do. You're using your power, and that's what we all need to do. We need to use our power. We are 50% of the world, at least, and more. 50% of the intelligence, competence, capability. We need 50% of the representation, and let's use the power that we have to get it and stop being positive, patient, and polite about this. Thank you so much, this wonderful panel. Thank you.